17th, 2021. Guess what? We're still under an emergency order by the governor. So this meeting is virtual under Minnesota statutes 13D.021. And those that are members of the public that would like to make any comments, please email us at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we will both post and respond to your comments in a timely manner. Given that we're virtual, we will have our attendance by calling the roll. Bridget.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson. Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson. Ferguson. Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez. Gonzalez. Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Muse.
Here.
Sterner.
Here.
Vento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Viren.
Present.
Chair Zelli.
I'm here. We have a quorum. And our first action is to approve the agenda. And unless there is an objection, we do not need a roll call. Unless anybody has any concerns, I will deem it approved, which brings us to the minutes, which were sent out. These are the minutes for March 3rd, Committee of the Whole meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Vento moves approval of the minutes.
Second, Atlas Ingebretson.
Thank you both. Any discussion? Corrections? Hearing none. Bridget, you may call the roll. Bridget, did we lose you? Oh, there you are.
Atlas
Oh.
Ingebretson.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Ferguson. Oh. Fredson.
Aye. Aye.
Gonzalez. Gonzalez. Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Muse.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Viren.
Zieren's aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. The minutes are approved. Thank you. So we do have one business item today, and I should point out that under the bylaws of the council, we may consider a time-critical business item on the committee of the whole meeting agenda when the item requires timely action from the council's governing body. So we're going to be considering this formal action on this business item at the committee of the whole meeting, which is not our normal practice, but as we know, this was originally scheduled for last week and it has been deferred to this week, so we are able to do that. It's business item 2021, procurement, and I would like to hand it off to Council Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2021-53 is for the base purchase of 143 60-foot diesel buses to serve Orange Line, D Line, B Line, and commuter express routes, and 29 bus options from New Flyer at a cost not to exceed $121,997,561. An RFP was advertised on October 28, 2020. One proposal was received from New Flyer of America Incorporated. Procurement staff conducted an adequate competition determination evaluation and concluded that there was no indication of that the solicitation specifications were restrictive and that there was adequate competition. The Office of Equal Opportunity did not set a DBE goal for this project as it is federally funded and requires proposers to comply with FTA DBE requirements for rolling stock. After the Transportation Committee approved this item, concerns were raised that this procurement does not include electric buses. There are two primary reasons that electric buses are not included in this procurement. First, the technology for 60-foot electric buses has not proven to be reliable. This is based on what we have learned with our C-Line 60-foot electric bus pilot, and that experience is consistent with the experience of other transit providers. Second, even if the technology that consistently performs as designed, the range of 60-foot electric buses is not sufficient to meet the demands of these routes. The coming BRT routes are longer than the C-Line, and to make up for the range limits of the current 60-foot electric bus technology, many more buses would need to be purchased to provide the same service. The timing of the opening of these lines does not allow us to wait until the technology becomes reliable and the range improves. In consideration of both technology and cost, biodiesel buses are the best option we have available for these routes. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 19P321 with New Flyer of America to provide 143 base order biodiesel 60-foot transit buses, including optional equipment, with options to purchase up to 29 additional replacement and expansion buses in an amount not to exceed $121,997,561.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Before we open up to discussion, may I have a second to the motion?
Wolf seconds.
Thanks, Wendy. Okay, any questions, discussion on the item? Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, this was not an easy decision for the Metropolitan Council to make. We, of course, want to use technology that is good for our environment. I think it's good to be a part of an organization that had a pilot that allowed us to see what the pros and cons are for electric buses. I would like to see us continue to monitor how our electric buses are working for the shorter routes and see if we can find some ways to increase our electric transportation on the shorter routes until we get better technology. I want to say that I'm very appreciative of everyone that called and emailed me personally regarding this issue. It shows that the community really cares about the electronic technology and its use, and that is a good sign. And I hope they continue to keep in touch with us about their needs and their priorities with regard to electric buses.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, thoughts? Yeah, please, Abdi.
Thanks, Chair. I understand that this procurement is not a good fit for electric buses, given the limited range of 6-foot electric buses, charging infrastructure and reliability, and the significant additional costs. Despite that, I am voting today in favor of this procurement with the understanding that the Metro Transit will continue to evaluate how we can advance bus electrification going forward. I support reducing our climate impact, and I'm excited that Metro Transit is continuing to seek opportunities that are good fit or good match for electrifying our fleet.
Thank you. Thank you, Abdi. Councilmember Barber, do you want to comment about our future plans as Transportation Committee Chair?
Absolutely. So as you know, every year in our different committees, we develop work plans. And one of the key things that is on our work plan for this upcoming year is to go back and revisit the electrification plan and how we're going to work to building some of that technology into our fleet and how we're going to do it strategically so that we know what's working in different areas and all of that. So that is going to be a key focus for us. And as we work through it at the committee level, we'll be more than happy to bring it back to a committee of the whole in the future of kind of where those discussions have gone and what the plan is so everyone has full transparency to it.
Great, thank you. Phil.
Thank you, Chair Zali. I'm going to vote against this motion today. I just feel like it's we have two extremes. We have either we're going to buy a full fleet of biodiesels for 4 different lines. It's going to tie our hands for 12 to 14 years. Versus, electric buses. I understand we're having issues with it. It's mostly with the charging portion of it, but I still have not gotten really great answers of like places in between. Like we got liquefied buses, we got natural gas, we got hydrogen cell buses. We've got just do the orange lines ones and maybe buy 25 buses until we get this stuff figured out. And so I'm just not satisfied that this is our only option we have. So I'm opposing for it with the hope that we go back to the drawing board and see what other solutions we have, including the technology that we're using. We have California that's just purchased 600 electric buses between 2 manufacturers. We have China that's 98% electrified with their buses. Europe is really growing pretty fast. So our technology may only be a year or 2 years away, and this will tie us for 12 years or more. And I think there's lease options or so on. So I'm just not satisfied with this proposal. So I'm going to vote it down and encourage other council members to do the same. So thank you.
All right. Linnea Ingebrigtsen, do you have a comment?
I just want to share also my support for Councilmember Sterner's comments. I'm also going to be voting no. I think for the all the same reasons. You don't need to hear me say them again. I also am really conscientious of the support we've had from legislators around this and communications and outreach I've had around that. And I think to seize the time and seize the moment and work better also to communicate with the public and electeds around barriers and find solutions together and not tie ourselves in so long at such a great level. I understand the barriers and the challenges of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber, you had your hand up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick comments. I understand the sentiment. I really do. I also, want to move towards the direction of electrification. But I think it's good to know that right now, electricity accounts for 1/3 of our ridership because that's all of our LRT system. And so that is a big impact that we're having already. Also, the other concern of going back to revisit to look at positioning this procurement differently or changing numbers or things like that would likely delay the opening of the orange line, which also has high impact of getting people out of cars and into the transit system.
Okay, any other thoughts? Well, I think we can, Peter, do you have something?
Sure, Mr. Chair. How many buses are for the orange line? How many are for the D and B, and how many are for express? Or can it not be broken out quite that easily?
It can give me 1 second to find the numbers.
And just while you're looking, what would be more inclined to support is an allocation for this purchase for at least the orange line, and then as was explained to us last week, we're moving forward with hiring some consultants to advise us on electric vehicle procurement. And at the same time, Toronto is doing their own pilot. So I would be inclined to see those things through this exploration of our own electric vehicle plan, having Toronto go through their pretty massive procurement, Toronto, which has pretty similar climate to ours, and let that play out over the next year. And I think my final note is we are pretty out here saying that 40-foot buses are where we are inclined to head for electric vehicles. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we'll be making a procurement for 40-foot buses maybe next year.
Yeah.
Not positive on that. Councilmember Barber would know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Well-
that's like kind of my point is we're out there pretty publicly saying 40-foot buses are likely the spot for electric vehicles. So I just want us all to remember that.
And
just go ahead, Councilmember Barber.
oh, thank you. So I do have the numbers, and I'm going to preface it again that for this procurement, if we go back out with changed numbers, it will likely delay the opening of the orange line. So orange line, it's 14 buses, D line 18, Metro 20, and commuter express route replacements, it's 91. And just a comment about the 60-foot buses. Agencies across the country have noticed issues with the longer buses. There has been some success with 40-foot buses. We did connect with the transit agency in Toronto, and all of their buses are 40-foot buses. So it's a good opportunity, I think, as we look at the electrification plan, because it is a similar climate, that we can watch their experience very closely and see how it goes as we inform that. Because yes, there will be a procurement at some time next year to replace the 40-foot fleet. The other concern that we with the longer buses, again, goes to the infrastructure, because they just don't have enough range to be able to go the distances that we need for even our commuter services, and that technology will likely lag a little bit further behind.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Could someone explain what the impact of staggering the procurement would be over the 3-year period? Is there an impact to the price that we are going to have to pay for these buses?
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not necessarily the price that becomes the issue. Obviously, price does matter, but it comes to the timing of it. It's for when you're ordering buses, you don't go out to a car lot to go pick out a car. They have to start building everything, and so in order to get things built in time to replace the buses that are end of life, and are probably not as in as good of condition, or even with the newer biodiesel technology, maybe not running as clean by the end of their life. We need to have that head start to make sure that we get in the queue so that we get the buses built in a timely manner, so we get what we need. And if we start changing anything, even with staggering it, again, we go back to that situation where we'd have to start the entire procurement process over.
My understanding is we do not have a procurement that allows us to have options. We have the procurement that is for this entire set. That's how the RFP went out, and that's what was bid on. Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the timing on the grant that we are hoping to receive from Excel, part of the $65 million grant that is from the PUC, and how would those dollars be used if we receive them?
I'll just take a shot at that. It is before the PUC as part of a larger Excel initiative, but that I think greater amount of that $100 million before the PUC would be for Met Council and for us to advance the work of our 40-foot electric bus procurement, including charging and smart metering. So having Excel as a partner, not just for the funds, which is substantial, but also how you can actually deploy it. So I think also we're looking at additional consultants to help advance this electrification work. The other thing is when you think about the Franklin renovation of our bus garages, we're actually having that with great anticipation of charging to be accommodated within our new building structures, which are coming again in the years ahead. So I think to say that we're locked in is actually not a kind of a good way of thinking of it. This is maybe 10, 15% of our fleet, but it's the long haul fleet, which is really not suitable for electrification at this time. There is great opportunity with the 85% of the rest of the fleet where we really can make a big difference. The stop and go in traffic kind of application is where electric vehicles really make a difference, and we can adequately support it. So it is a evolving technology. It is the future, but I think we got to be smart about how we deploy it in our system.
And Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Barber. Yep.
Thank you. So the numbers for the potential grant would be with PUC is 65 million, and that would definitely help us build out the infrastructure. It's my understanding that we're also applying for another FTA low or no emissions grant, which that's how we initially got the C-Line electric buses. So, there are plans in place to start bringing technology in.
Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just say one thing that gives me a little pause is something I brought up last week, which is the fact that we're being presented with either diesel or EV as the choices here, and there are other alternatives like hybrids, which we heard last week also may have some of their own maintenance challenges. But I think it would be great if we further explored some of the other alternatives that Councilmember Sterner brought forward, whether that's fuel cell or combined natural gas or hybrids, which we've had since I think 2002, something like that.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the hybrid buses were a good addition, but they are requiring additional maintenance and incurring much higher maintenance costs. For the other technologies that you measure or mentioned, it was all sort of looked at and has over time. And the concern is no different than the electric side, is that for those different modes, you also need infrastructure, which that's where it would lead to significant additional costs.
Also, at highway applications of buses, I'm saying this as a bus guy, as great as hybrids are in more stop and go traffic, at highway speeds, the delta between a hybrid and the diesel buses is fairly small. So we think our best impacts for climate and for these propulsion systems are going to be in the regular bus system. Just maybe one more question, and I think because we have such important information items coming ahead, I want to make sure we have a chance to take the time.
This is Councilor Musa. I don't want to take someone else's time, but if someone
Sure.
else, yeah. So, also generally speaking, we should also acknowledge that our actions are limited by how much money we have, and of course, we shouldn't be moving to electrifying buses at the expenses of providing service people need, service that really helps service that helps keep cars off the road. But we must also shift to
Great comment. And I would just say before we take a vote that this is a great conversation, and I kind of will echo Councilmember Chambliss, who really thanked those who reached out and really shown some great passion for an initiative that is one of our core goals as a council, which is climate. And we need to be, as Councilmember Musse says, advocating for the funding that it will take and help to take the time and be thoughtful about how we advance this important work. Councilmember Barber, you have the last word if you have one.
All I was going to say was to thank Councilmember Musse for his comments, because that, really as we look to this electrification plan and what we want to do, we do need additional funding, and it's looking for grants, and but it's also looking to a transportation bill in the future, and hopefully the work that we do over this next year can help inform that. So I really appreciate his comments, and I know that he also commented about the need to make sure that we're, getting people on the transit system and having reliable, efficient buses as part of how we do that. So much appreciated.
Thank you, and thank you all. I think we have a motion and a second and a robust discussion. Bridget, please call the roll.
All right, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
No. Nay? I guess I don't say it often enough to know which one to say. I apologize.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez. Gonzalez. Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
No.
Musse.
Aye.
Sterner.
Nay.
Vento.
No.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zirin.
Aye. Zieren's aye.
Chair
Aye. Thank you. That motion is carried. And now we're on to our information items, and I'm really excited that we have with us the guests from the Citizens League to do an update on our traffic safety engagement process. We have been talking about this for some time, and I know there have been many questions about where we are, and I think we're really getting into important work at an important time. So I'm pleased to introduce our own Michelle Fury, but also joined by Amanda Kunzbahari and Marika Pfefferkorn. Welcome, and it's nice that you could be with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We appreciate the opportunity to give you an update. It has been quite some time since we talked about this before you, so this is a great opportunity to give you an update. As Chair Zelli mentioned, we have guests with us from the Citizens League team, Amanda Kunzbahari and Marika Pfefferkorn, who have been really helping lead some of the critical work, especially with the committees that we've established to support the engagement effort. And Kate Simoneau, the executive director of the Citizens League, is also with us today. So if you have any questions that they can answer, they are here to make sure that you walk away with whatever information you need about how this project is progressing. We're going to tag team today, so I'm going to start and give you a little bit of an introduction about where we are and what's been happening. And then I'll turn it over to Amanda and Marika and Kate to help fill you in on how things are going. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. So we're going to give you a progress report today that really identifies the work the Citizens League has been facilitating, which includes a stakeholder committee, a community committee, and the planned engagement. We're going to talk to you a little bit about some staff support that we've instituted in addition to some of the critical staff who would otherwise be involved in this. We have some additional things that we've created to augment the Citizens League work and really support their work. I want to give you a sense of what to expect from a timing perspective as we move forward here in the coming months. And then we'll have some time to take your questions if you have any. So please feel free to let us know as we go if you have any questions you'd like clarification on. Next slide, please, Greg. So to just remind you about the scope of this project, it really is a deep engagement around safety on our transit system, near our transit system, near the properties that support our transit system, so our stations, our stops, etc. And this really does include the aspects that we've discussed previously, how people experience our transit system and safety as it relates to our transit system, and then the broader impact that our transit system really has on our communities and the members of the community and their understanding of safety on transit. It's all encompassing, it's intended to be all encompassing, and so I just wanted to be as intentionally specific as possible about that. We're also intentionally engaging a range of voices in the community on these topics, as you've instructed us to do, and as of course we need to do in order to really have an understanding of this. The other thing that, just to remind you, we are using data, both quantitative and qualitative, that has been collected from riders and others on our system, as well as any related analysis to help guide the question. So all of the information that we already had gathered, surrounding not just safety, but customer experiences on our system have been given to the Citizens League for analysis and to help contribute to the work that they are planning for engaging communities. And then, as I mentioned, we're also using the two committees, the stakeholder and community committee, to assure the range of voices is included in these fundamental parts of the process. And in the next couple of slides, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about how that's going and how those groups will be used moving forward to really frame this engagement, help promote this engagement, and then support the engagement moving forward. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have these two external committees, and this slide really outlines the membership of the stakeholders on the stakeholder advisory group. And really the role of this group is to provide the stakeholder level point of view for any engagement, survey work, other communications related to this project. And as you can see, it includes Metropolitan Council members, including Councilmember Ferguson and Councilmember Chambliss. It includes our General Manager, Wes Koistra, and Chief Frizzell. It includes Community Development Director, Lisa Barajas, who is supporting this effort not only as a person who is a frequent rider of transit, but also oversees the housing, HRA, and homeless related support that we've been providing on our system in the past this year or more. We have transit operators, which is a critical constituency in this conversation. We have Anita Urbina Davis from the Equity Advisory Committee, who is supporting this effort. We have a representative from the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce. And then we have past customers, and the reason that's important is because they represent a related sort of business interest, but also a rider interest. And so it's great to have the representative from the U.S. Bank and St. Paul College on our stakeholder group, and they've really been digging in on some of the key issues. I'm going to ask Amanda to take over from here and talk to you a little bit about how the 2 meetings that we've had so far have gone and what's upcoming with this committee. Amanda.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, council members. It's nice to see folks, some familiar faces, new faces, and just want to thank you on behalf of Citizens League and Marika's team for having us here to do an update with you, and we're excited to get into any questions that you have. So as Michelle mentioned, my name is Amanda Kunchbahari. I'm kind of your project point from the Citizens League. My role there is the Director of Public Policy. And I am helping to really convene the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So we've had 2 meetings so far. I think, Michelle, you did a fabulous job of laying out kind of what this committee does. I really see them as advisors for high-level strategy and guidance on engaging stakeholders in this process, and specifically stakeholders that Marika's Community Planning Committee will not be reaching. So Marika will talk about that in a little bit. And to date, so we've had 2 meetings. Our first meeting in February was really kind of our level setting meeting. So this is the chance to make sure that folks get to know each other. Some people knew each other, some people didn't. So really wanted to make sure we're building that trust, relationship, and rapport with the members of that group. We also discussed how we were going to work together, and then really getting into the purpose of this project as a whole and the purpose of this committee so that we were all starting on the same page. We just had another meeting, and my days are just like flying past me, so I don't remember if it was this week. I think it was just last week on Monday. And I'm sure many of you have that same feeling as well. But for our second meeting, we really started to get into, I think we recognize that because we have such a diverse group of folks coming from many different points of view on this committee, we wanted to make sure that we were doing some intentional level setting. So Michelle really amazingly just kind of went through some Met Council governance and structure documents and just a PowerPoint that talked through that for the Met Council and the Metro Transit Police Department. I think there were definitely some insights that were learned and new information that was gathered from the folks in that meeting. So that was super helpful. And then we started to dive into kind of like a stakeholder mapping and brainstorm of, again, getting to the kind of nuts and bolts of who we actually want to connect with and making sure that we're including as many perspectives and points of view as possible. And an example of this that I thought was so helpful just to articulate who we actually mean. One of our members from this group brought up that they go to sporting events and they're usually going to sporting events by using the light rail or some form of transit. And so that is a stakeholder that we should probably be connecting with, just thinking about whether that's, different teams or organizations that are sports related, but how they're being impacted as well. So going forward, just to lay out the plan, we have 1 meeting a month for this committee. The next meeting that we have in April, we are really going to dig into the actual questions that we want to ask of the different stakeholders that we identify. And then going forward from there until the end of the project, this group is going to really be serving as kind of ongoing strategy development and just kind of making sure that we are on the right track, the right page with this work. So I'm going to pass it now to Marika to kind of talk a little more about the community planning group.
Greg, you can advance the slide, please.
Thank you, Amanda, and greetings, Chair Zell and committee members. My name is Marika Pfefferkorn, and I'm excited to be here working with the Citizens League on this project on behalf of the Twin Cities Innovation Alliance. So since the beginning of 2021, the pandemic has not held us back. We've been meeting regularly with the community committee. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about what that arc has looked like and share with you where we are in the process. So first, I just want to share at a high level that we had an open process to invite people to apply to the community committee. We had a number of questions in the survey to really figure out what part of the region they were representing, what experience they were bringing to the table, whether they rode the bus for work or light rail, or if they used it as a social tool. So we really found a great deal of information out about the people and who they were and what kind of who they represented when it comes to ridership, because we really wanted to have a broad representation, because we knew that would reflect a broad understanding and definition of what is safety to me and to my community, and then also what is our lived experience then with Metro Transit Police. And so there were a lot of folks that applied, and we landed on 10 members of this committee and narrowed it down to 8, understanding that good group dynamic work really lands well in the 8 number. And so we have a age range of 17 up until 65. We'll leave it there. They really are a really broad group of folks. We also understand that one of the stakeholders is Minneapolis Public Schools, and so we wanted to make sure that we had young people that were represented in that as a part of our ridership. We also recognize that diversity means disability, ability, it means language, it means all different kinds of things, and so we really do have a broad spectrum of representation. But that is to say that this group is really going to be pulling together the survey that is going to engage the broader community. And so we're really using this group of folks to help us come up with the questions for the survey that we are going to deliver, for the interviews we will provide, and the forums that we will hold. So what will that look like? So right now we had our community building to build this community of folks that are working together on the committee. We did a high level similar to the stakeholder group. We covered what is Metropolitan Council, what are the relationships with the state, what are the different departments. So we also did an activity where we identified who their commissioners were. So I'm not expecting any direct outreach, but don't be surprised, because they're really excited about their knowledge and what they're learning about the Metropolitan Council. So many of them we asked before we did the presentation of the Met Council. They had no idea of all the things that you all focus on. So it was a good eye opener for many of our community members. I also wanted to mention that we do have members of the business community that their employees are dependent on transit, and they also participate in transit. So again, a really diverse group of people. In addition to understanding who Metropolitan Council is, the last session that we had is, how do you actually execute on a good question? Because as community members, we have our own perspectives, but how do we get the perspectives of other people out in a way that is meaningful and reflects good data for us to look at and analyze? So our next session, we meet twice a month. Our next session is going to build out that survey. And the way that we're doing it is, what are these different domains of safety that we understand? Because we want people to think about safety more broadly than I get on a bus and something happens. It could be lighting, it could be the built environment, it could be the reliability to be able to trust that your route is on time. So we want to help people dig deeper into their definitions as we go through this process. And so how do we make really good questions? And we're going to be working on the survey itself. We're going to deploy it out all across the community. We've been working in partnership with Michelle and her team, knowing that between the newsletter list and the ridership list, that's about 45,000 people that we'll be able to send this survey out to. And we're going to be going out into community and making sure that there's postings with Q codes so they can take the survey. And once we get all that information in, we're going to say, okay, where are the gaps in information? Are there particular regions that the council needs to hear from? Is there an age group? And that's where our targeted interviews are really going to come in, where we'll do one-on-one interviews out in community around the different places where there might be targeted populations. And so that will be our next step. And we'll use both of those processes, the survey and the interviews, to inform our community forums, to let folks know this is what we've started to collect and react and make sure that, again, is your voice reflected in this? Where can you find yourself in this, and how do you want to contribute with your information? And so we will take all that collective information, we'll work with Amanda with the stakeholder committee, and with that information, we will put up all our data analysis, the themes that have come out, and we will provide a report to you by the end of June. So it has been a really good process, and we're excited to answer questions after the rest of folks have presented on their details.
We just have a couple more slides. Greg, go ahead and advance the slide. One of the things we wanted to make sure we told you about is the changes that have happened in the, as a result of the process so far. And one of them is to, really make sure that we're providing the most robust staff support that we can to this overall effort. One of the things that became pretty clear as we were formulating the membership for the stakeholder committee in particular is that, we could have added a bunch of staff to that committee, but that would have changed, to Marika's point before, the dynamic of that committee. And we really wanted staff to be supportive and present in those conversations, but not necessarily serve as members of that team. So the best way to help connect our council and transit staff to this process is really to create an internal staff team that can be ready to respond to questions raised by this process, either the stakeholders, the community, or members who are participating in the forums. Respond to those questions that are raised at other engagement efforts. Our staff are out engaging community every day. We need to make sure that there's a connection point for any of the things that we're hearing that might relate to this effort, but also that our staff might be getting some questions, right? So we want to make sure that we have the right information at the right times, but also just to make sure that as the information starts coming in from community and we start learning what the next steps might look like, making sure that we have a place for those topics to come up so that they can be raised to you as council members eventually down the road. So we created this internal staff team. It has staff on it that represent the different operational divisions and engagement teams within Metro Transit, but also the various folks that are represented on the stakeholder committee as well, in addition to government affairs and our audit staff. So it's a big group of people. We have met once, and we will probably meet again here in the next couple of weeks. But we're also creating infrastructure to collaborate that doesn't require us to necessarily have a meeting in order to make decisions or be responsive to whatever's happening in the effort. It's been really a good group. Everybody's really engaged and excited to support this effort and to learn more about what we can from our community. And it just, from my perspective, it just made a lot of sense to make sure that we had a place to plug in so that we could get, not only quick response, but accurate and deep response from the folks that are involved in the work every day. So that's one piece that we've added to this structure that we hope will result in, much more comprehensive support for the Citizens League team and Marika's team as we move forward. Next slide, please. So this is our last slide. As you heard, our teams are meeting to structure engagement, and things are going to be happening soon. There will be a survey, there will be some interviews, and of course, as Marika suggested, there will be some community forums. We're anticipating full results at the end of June, but we expect that we'll start hearing themes and trends emerge, and we'll be able to communicate some of those things to our staff, to our leadership, and to all of you as they come in, because ultimately we know that the themes that are emerging are relevant to the operations that we provide every day. So we want to make sure that they're being plugged in where appropriate as this comes together. So as we think about what is next, of course, the next phase would be, sort of as we've talked about before, understanding what changes or policy changes or directions might come out of what we learned from community. We'll have some questions about how that will be supported long term. It may mean we extend our arrangement with the Citizens League, we involve other resources. We have not determined that yet, but we're hoping that as this evolves over the next several months, it will become clearer how we can better support the next thing. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that this is not just a take all of the information, learn what we learn, and then what, right? We're going to start moving us in a direction where we have some sense of what the next phase might look like here in the coming weeks. It's exciting. And I know that I appreciate the ability to work with the talented and well situated team at the Citizens League and the Twin Innovation Alliance. It's just been really fun to work together and to share ideas. So having them as resources is tremendous, but it's also really important work, and we just really appreciate the opportunity to support your decision making moving forward. And that's all we have to present. We are happy to stand for any questions that you have.
Thank you, all of you. Let's open it up. Any questions? Go ahead.
My name's giving you a run for your money.
I just say it fast.
All right. Well, thanks for the presentation, and nice to see some familiar faces. Happy to see engaged and hear the plan. This work is very important. I want to make sure we're being really clear as a council. We've talked about this a ton around following good practices in public engagement and what our promise is to the committees involved and the public around the input we're collecting. And I really want us to lean into that and be clear. One of the things that I heard a lot in one of our first engagements, I think Council Member Lilligren was with me, and I heard this not just from community members, but I also heard this from our staff, is we have in other iterations of the council, other cohorts of the council, other times, asked the community for their input and then failed to take action. So to me, that promise to the community is important, and clear action statements that we are going to follow up on is essential. It's essential that we do not use extractive practices, meaning that we take from the community and not invest back. And we still have the input that was received. I think it was in, I'm sure someone at
We might have lost your audio, Linnea.
It's just me.
Yeah, we're not hearing you. It cut off just 20 seconds ago.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So what I was saying is basically we did do community engagement in 2015, I believe. I might be wrong about that. And communities asked what happened to those things we asked for then. So I think it's important to now this time make sure we're committed to following up on actions and accountable to it. But also I think that we should also make sure that we're taking the information that was gathered at that point, seeing how much of that is still relevant and helpful today. So that's just one thing I wanted to ask about. And then I wanted to also ask, I've been really deeply involved with Metro Transit in understanding and making sure we're building a muscle around how we track information, particularly related to Black and Indigenous youth under the ages of 18. And so I want to know, how can I get engaged with the work of this group? I'm not on the committee, to make sure that those connections are being made and to aid and support in the work.
Councilmember, thank you for the feedback. I personally will make sure that you get involved in any of the once we have some specifics where we're calling on community to participate in things. I'll make sure that you all have access to that information so you can help promote it to any communities that you're connected to or any folks that you want to make sure are involved. And we'll just keep you in the loop on that so that you're aware who we're reaching and who we're trying to reach and maybe not reaching. But the intent is that we'll make sure that we use any channel and network available to us to make sure that the participation is high and well connected. Amanda, Marika, Kate, did you want to say any more about that?
Chair, can I just clarify? My question's not, I mean, I'm happy to support promoting information, but it's really specific about the work that I've been doing in myself. So I'm asking, how can I get involved to make sure that the team has all the information? I want to make sure I'm just closing the loop on some of that work. Expected that this was going to be a part of it, that our response to the research that we found in the fall was going to be getting addressed through this effort. I just want to make sure, so there's no surprises later down the road, that that is in fact happening. So I'm asking about that.
I mean,
Any
yes.
other?
I understand.
All righty, Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I had a work meeting I had to do. I'm really interested in this topic, have been ever since I got on the council. So I'm thrilled for this presentation today. I have some questions. So I appreciate the slides that were shown. I've been tracking in my own, I've got the presentation up here for myself too. So as far as it relates to, I'll just start with business interests. So I saw St. Paul Chamber on there. Did we reach out to suburban chambers, the Minneapolis Chamber, the Downtown Council? They've all been, especially in the core city, they've all been very, very key on safety around transit, safety in certain zones in the downtown areas for the business community. But to also remember that, we are a big region and transit goes all over the place, and we have business associations all over the place that have their own points of view too. And so I just don't know how we weave those voices in, because as council members representing 16 districts and the chairs at large, we want to make sure that the voices are representative geographically as well. So that's one question I have. And how were the ones that we've engaged so far selected? My other question is, what kind of data have we provided from Metro PD to the group, or will we be providing to the group? Because we do, as Linnea said, we do have records and have data, and we get complaints all the time. And, there's, I guess, an array of complaints that we get that it might be people are smoking on the train. Well, does that cause an issue of safety? All the way to criminal activity on a train or near a stop. So I'm just wondering, since we, have a lot of data, is that going to be provided too, so that people outside of their own experience can see the plethora of things that we're dealing with, to kind of, have maybe the broader perspective of things that have been raised by community via a complaint process. Also, are council members on this committee, have they been engaged? And if they have, how did they get invited? Because I would have loved to have been invited. I've expressed a lot of interest on that, or at least would like to still be invited. Another one I asked early on in the process, I'm really glad, of course, that Metro PD leaders are on this. I think there's some value as we move forward to bring other leaders in public safety around this to understand what best practices are. I mean, we have a great chief, he's been on the job for about 1.5 years now, have great confidence, in 21st century policing. But I think sometimes too, when you're talking about public safety, it's worth a look to get outside of your organization and, from that side of it, just, get viewpoints, expertise that might shed some informative things for the group to look at. Also, and maybe this was included, I think there was one college included, it was a St. Paul college, so it seems a little St. Paul skewed, nothing wrong with that, born and raised there, love St. Paul. But, the U of M, I get a lot of, in my part of the world, I do get parents that attend the U, and the U has its own system, of course, but they're also connecting to the greater transit system. And I get a lot of complaints from parents, quite frankly, that they are, having safety issues for their students, and have actually told their students to not take Metro Transit. So I'm just wondering how we reach into that large group if we can. And then also, just looking at who we've been serving lately too, essential workers, people that, must take transit to get to their job, especially during the pandemic. If there's been any outreach, to specific sectors of people who are riding regularly on our trains, and buses, all transit. So I guess for me, this is just such a wonderful opportunity. I'm so grateful to the Citizens League and staff coming in support, especially having staff from multiple departments to have their input as well. But I also come at this with having done public work for over 20 years and engaging community to the point that I think Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen made, we bring it up all the time, is how are, in the groups you've engaged, council members will often ask, well, specifically who and how and who showed up and how many were there, and disaggregating the data so that we know we are really pushing to reach into community. And also making sure that the council members are being brought along in the process, because and I say this with great intent and positive outcomes, right? We want to be in sync, because I have also known that there have, in my experience, efforts and work that has taken place to look at issues and opportunities, and groups meet and then they bring together a bunch of recommendations, but the council hasn't been as engaged. And we sit there going, well, we can do some of this, but there's no way we can do all of this because A, we're not allowed to, or B, and I'm not saying that's the case here, but I think my experience is telling me that to keep us very engaged, so that when recommendations do come forward, we're on the same track. And that's not to mean that we should interfere with the process, but I just know the best outcomes have been when the council was like, yep, this is where we're going, this is what we're wanting. We empower people to do this, and we're aligned so that we can act at the end. But it doesn't always work that way, and I feel like I'm just a little out of the loop on this one. And yet it's been one of the things that I know I've mentioned to the chair and others that I'm very interested in, how we're going to improve public safety and make sure that our citizens, clients, people that we serve every day are getting the most out of their experience and feel safe.
Councilmember, thank you. I'll start with your last question first, and then I'll go through the I think I got them all. The reason you're probably not hearing a ton from the council member perspective is we're really still in the planning phases, and as soon as we're more actively surveying and getting out into community, we'll absolutely be looping all of you in on what we're hearing and what's happening, so that you can be as involved as you would like to. But back to your initial question about the stakeholder group and who got chosen for the stakeholder group. We did send invitations to the chambers, and the St. Paul Chamber was willing to appoint a person, and the other chambers were not able to appoint someone at this time. So we did reach out to them and ask them if they would participate. But one thing that I want to encourage everyone is these committees that we're focusing a lot of time on tonight are important because they're helping form the strategic and community voice aspect of this work, but they're not the only way that people are going to be able to provide input into this process. We're going to be doing broad engagement as a result of the work that these committees are doing. So there will be lots of opportunities for us to further penetrate some of these audience groups, like business interests, students. As Marika suggested, we're really aware of the importance of the relationship with Minneapolis Public Schools and the student pass customers and things like that. So there's going to be some intense connection points with all of these organizations throughout the engagement process. So they will be involved, and we will hear from them, and we will make sure that we prioritize to hear from them. So I just wanted to clarify. Oh, go ahead.
Barking dogs. Thanks. That really does help, Michelle. I so much appreciate that. And just remember, we are one region, and our core cities are awesome. But the suburban communities, if the chambers declined and didn't want to participate, that's one thing. But I know we have some suburban chambers that are really very actively engaged in transit and pushing for things. So that surprises me a bit. I don't doubt what you're saying, but again, just geographically, it's really important, because there's nothing worse at the end of the day coming out with something and, some people were like, I never knew about it, what's going on. And, so it's just so that we have success. That's where my intentions are coming from.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think we need to make sure that those groups participate in the process, even if they weren't members of the stakeholder committee. And one of the things that Councilmember Ferguson has noted a couple of times in the two meetings that we've had with the stakeholder group is the importance of getting those perspectives from non-central cities, transit riders, and people who are associated and related to the transit system. So 100% agree and appreciate that emphasis on making sure that we get those folks involved in this process. Your question about the data, we did provide a significant amount of data from both transit interactions, transit customer information, the range of things you could think of. If we have the data, the Citizens League and the team have it, and they are using it to steer this process. And it was, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay it. It was a lot of information. I think they can attest to the fact that it was a lot of information. So they have all of that, and it's really, really critical to make sure that this is grounded in that information that we already have. And to Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen's point, we need to be responsive to some of those things that we have not been responsive to, at least so far, at least to the extent that maybe even a community had expected us to, right? So we need to spend some time on that. I would say to your questions about, or your point of view about leaders in public service or public safety, great point. Certainly something we can make sure that we loop in as we move forward. And essential workers and other riders, definitely we have one of the connection points that Marika referenced is that we have a pretty robust list of customers that we'll be engaging in this process as well. So we'll make sure that that we're not shortchanging the customer/rider aspect of this as well. Your other point about disaggregating data and making sure that we're, clearly connecting all of this work to the broader interests that the council has articulated are also on our radar in terms of how we capture this information and report it back to you. So I just want to say how much I appreciate your very complete, detailed list of things that you want to make sure you see. That's really important for us to make sure that we reflect back as well. So that kind of detail is super helpful, and I just really appreciate your articulation of it here, and hopefully we've answered your questions to satisfy you today, but there's more to come.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, just one more thing. And Michelle, how then did council members get invited to be part of the stakeholder group?
So when the number of people that were identified for the size of the stakeholder group came from the conversations that we had with the Citizens League, we talked about having 2 members of the council, and not to throw Chair Zelli under any buses or anything like that, but he helped us make the decisions about who the council members.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that we all can't be part of it, but I think that, and Chair Zelli, you're great. All due respect to you, for sure. But I think
I can fall under a bus very easily.
Well,
so
I noticed that a pun was not intended, I'm sure. But I think that asking all council members who has interest, and then working and whittling down a list from there, because otherwise, maybe not everybody's interested in everything. That's certainly the case for me, but I've expressed interest in this topic for some time. Would have loved to be part of it. No, I can't be part of everything, but I guess, since being on the council, I've always wondered, how do people get picked for things and who gets to be selected? That's a whole nother discussion, but it's only, again, because I have such great interest and support for this topic.
And Judy, I will say your interest is noted, and I would just also generally say that, as Michelle has said, we're going to be going through many different phases. So this is just a general, those that have a special interest beyond just what we're doing with Committee of the Whole and other council conversations, reach out to me or Michelle, and we'll make sure there's more opportunities. So thank you, duly noted.
Interest noted, appreciate it.
Any other thoughts, questions? Linnea?
I want to pause to see if there was anybody else out there, but one thing I want to make sure we don't need to hear it today if it's not there, but that we do get back at the council level sooner rather than later in the process is the scope of the conversation that we're having? I'm a little curious about scope creep. If we remember where this conversation came from, if it was really an outcome of the murder of George Floyd and our concerns around our own practices and liabilities. We had data that came out in September that I don't even know that all our council members received, and we were waiting for this process to then release that information, talking about the young people and their engagement with our officers. And so if the scope of this work has changed, I think that'd be good to be clear about. But if I remember incorrectly, why we're doing this really came from understanding our obligation for oversight, our practices, and looking at that in a holistic way. And I just thought that maybe that would be helpful for people to hear.
Council members, I think that you're correct that that is still the scope of this conversation. One of the reasons that we're calling it a safety conversation is to make sure that we're being inclusive about people's experiences as it relates to the transit system, so that we're not just limiting it to specific police interactions, but how they feel and how they perceive safety on our system. So we initially, early on in the coordination with the Citizens League, wanted to make sure that we were being conscientious about how people might feel about the system. So that was one of the reasons that we're calling it a safety conversation, but you're correct that it is about interactions with our police department on our system and near our system.
Chair, can I
Go
just
ahead.
a quick follow-up on that? So just like in our conversations about addressing systemic racism, when we make the conversation about everything, it stops being about what the conversation was meant to be about. So I want to encourage that if that is the case, that you explicitly say it just like we just talked about it just now. When you say safety and you say a survey, we're going to get 50,000 responses that we've heard all along, and that generated additional revenue from the legislature for a light rail line that's not functioning yet due to fears around safety. And we know that's going to happen. And then we're going to have to do these other measures to try and bring in other voices, and they'll always be made to be marginalized because they had to be brought in other ways. So I just want to challenge the Citizens League and the committee to hear that and to have a plan and to be able to speak explicitly about the scope and the impetus and be able to address why it is that we could get additional funds for safety on a light rail that wasn't functioning yet. And yet, when communities of color have brought up issues of safety, we have not delivered or had additional revenue go into addressing systems or practices around those issues. Hoping that that's falling on some ears. Happy to have good conversations to follow up.
Appreciate that.
Any other thoughts, comments? Well, I'll just underscore that this is a beginning, even though it's been a long beginning, but I think we're getting to the heart of it. So this feedback is really, and questions are really helpful. And just we could talk, and we have, about what it means to be safe. And I think that just to underscore the idea that this isn't about just one view. This is making sure that those that have been underrepresented can ensure that we're being fully cognizant. And so I think getting a greater context and scope, a definition to kind of highlight that is a great suggestion. Thank you. I think it's 5:15. We now have 45 minutes, and we have another 45-minute information item. So I will thank the Citizens League, Amanda, Kate, Marika, for coming here this evening. Jim Alexander was very patient for 2 hours last week, and And rather, we had the choice of giving him 5 minutes or 45 minutes. He chose 45 minutes today. So we're going to segue in. Thank you, Citizens League, for being with us. And we're now going to get the Southwest Light Rail update. And I believe we're going to hear from, in addition to Jim Alexander, we're going to hear from Sam O'Connell and John Dow for giving us a pretty robust update, a quarterly update, but a lot has been happening. I can attest to that. I hear it every day. Jim?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, this is our quarterly update. We were last before the council back in December 9 of last year. And so, Greg, if you could advance the slides, we'll maybe go ahead and get into it. And go ahead and scoot down a few more slides there. And we'll keep on going. And we'll stop there. So slide 6, we presented some of these numbers to you back in December, but this is kind of still just a little update for 2020 of what was accomplished. Again, full funding grant agreement back in September. Still clapping our hands for that one. And the stats, as you see, I think most of these we gave you last time, just kind of a reminder of what was accomplished for 2020. But we're going to talk about 2021 and moving forward here. So next slide, please, Greg. And so this just kind of shows our sequence of events as we look at LRT construction, starting underground utilities and getting into site prep. We're right now into structures. If you go down the alignment, you'll see a lot of structures that are popping out of the ground. Eventually, we'll get to systems and testing, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these pieces. Next slides, please. So before we get into 2021 and to have some slides that have occurred, construction's occurred last quarter so far, I wanted to talk about two key issues that are before us. And the first is a quarter protection wall, and the second is a secant wall. And I've got some images and subsequent slides to talk about these. I want to just say out front, because I've been getting a lot of questions on this, that these two issues are really big for the project, and they will be impacting the project schedule. And at this juncture, we do not know what kind of impact that's going to be. We're assessing that. We have a number of contracts to get through: the civil construction, systems construction, there's integration, and then we get to pre-rev operations. All sorts of things need to get figured out before we can really assess what that impact is going to be. But we're in the middle of that right now, looking at that. So let's talk about the quarter protection first. This, you may recall, this is required by the railroad, part of our agreement, and we knew this going in. However, at the time that this was being introduced into the project, we were just finishing up the procurement for the civil construction, and environmental review was still ongoing. And the environmental review was subsequently wrapped up, but we knew that we'd had to add this as a change order. So we're looking at doing that right now. And we'll actually be before the Transportation Committee next week to talk about this item as a change order for that committee's consideration. And I'll have some images to talk about that in a moment. The other issue is secant wall, and this is part of the Kenilworth Tunnel construction that we have in Minneapolis. And this has really come about because of unforeseen soil conditions. And I'll talk about that when I have some images. Might make more sense when I show you some cross sections. And we're really taking this approach, this alternative method is out of abundance of caution, because we're right next to some foundations along a segment of the tunnel. And this will be added by a change order to the civil construction contract as well. So Greg, next slide, please. So this is the depiction of the quarter protection wall. This is at Bassett Creek Valley Station, essentially kind of a cartoonish look of what it will look like. And next to the station and down below, you can see in cross section that of what it looks like as you look at the freight off to the left and the LRT guideway. It may not seem much here. This is a 10-foot high wall on the freight side. It varies from 4 to 6 feet on the LRT side. But it's the extension's over a mile long. It's built to withstand a freight impact to that wall, so it doesn't impact the light rail. and vice versa for light rail to it'll withstand light rail vehicles from hitting the wall and preventing anything from going over the wall to the other side, and over a mile long. So this essentially extends from Bryn Mawr Station all the way up to about the I-94 area where we cross under that bridge. Next slide, please. So the Seacamp Pile Wall, this is a map in between the lakes, Cedar Lake and Lake the Isles there, just north of Westlake Street Station. You can see in blue there is a short segments, about 500 feet of the tunnel, which is about a half mile long, in the dark brown color depicting the tunnel length just south of that channel between the lakes and extending just north of Westlake Street Station. And it is just a short segment, but we do need to do this because of the close proximity of the foundations. Next slide, please. So if you look at this in cross section, this is an image off the left with our original plan where the contractor has been installing sheet pile walls. And in fact, that work is essentially done for the tunnel section that I talked about on both sides of the tunnel. And you see the bracing. I'll have an image to show you what that looks like in real time. But if you look in plan view down below that sheet pile wall, you can see it's kind of like a corrugated metal that essentially gets pushed into the ground. And what we had encountered as we were pushing these sheets into the ground is that we had some resistance. We had to do this hydraulically, as opposed to typically this is either vibrated in or pounded in. We had to be very mindful of vibration impacts through this area. So we had a method of installing them through a hydraulic means method, but that caused some challenges getting the sheets into the ground because of the density of the soil, and also because we encountered a number of boulders and cobbles and other debris in the ground. And so thus we had some resistance, and we had to actually put an auger in front of the sheet ahead of the sheet as we pressed it in the ground to allow those sheets to get into the ground that length there. And due to the settlement that we had observed adjacent to the sheets in some areas, we had decided to, next to the foundations in that blue segment that I talked about, to look at a secant pile wall. And you can see the difference in plan view down below off to the right, which is it's a series of columns that are filled with concrete. Every other one is filled with an I-beam, a steel I-beam, to provide a stout supportive excavation, if you will. Go to the next slide there, Greg. So you can kind of see what the final product would look like. The tunnel itself is really still the same from what we're building on the original plan to what we're building next to the Cedar Isles condominiums. We have to have that secant pile wall in place. And I think the next image will show what that looks like. If you go to the next slide there. So this is the bottom right is an image from the website, a website just showing what that looks like in real time. And then you can kind of get an idea of the insulation of these secant piles on the upper left there. So one more slide there, Greg, and then I'll pause to see if there's any questions. And both of these elements are really major projects by themselves, and adding these to the 14.5 miles of work we have to do is just posing some stress and challenges on the schedule due to their scope and complexity. And so in terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we will be bringing a proposed change order to the Transportation Committee next week for this corridor protection wall. We're still finishing up that change order this week, and we'll be ready to post that later this week. The secant wall is we're in the middle of pricing that, so we do not have a cost for that yet. We will have that shortly, and we'll be bringing that to the Transportation Committee for consideration in later this spring. Tied to that, if you can recall what that tunnel map looked like, we have to look at seeing how the tunnel is going to be constructed with that blue segment that is now secant wall rather than the sheet pile. It does kind of turn things on its head a little bit in terms of how the tunnel is going to be constructed. So the contractor has to look at doing some resequencing, just because we have such a tight corridor in this area and very, very limited access. So we'll be looking at doing a change order for the resequencing. And then later on, as we start getting the schedule fleshed out, better understood, we will be looking at reaching agreement with our contractors on the schedule and completing change orders for those pieces as well. So, Mr. Chair, I might pause there for a moment. There's a lot of information that I just laid out before I get into the other slides.
All right, these are two big elements and challenges. The SECA wall and the train protection barrier. Any questions about what those mean and how that's working? All right.
Okay, well, we can proceed back to the PowerPoint there, Greg. And we're on to slide number 15. Just wanted to show you some images of work that has been going on last quarter. For winter work, it is a little tough doing concrete work during the winter, particularly as we had the big freeze in last month, but there was some work still taking place. This is out Southwest Station where we're building a 450 stall ramp. And you can see off to the right a little bit, that's where the guideway will be. Buses will be further to the right for Southwest Transit to commingle with the trains. And then the workers down there are building the kind of the foundations of that ramp itself. Next slide, please. We're going to continue to progress eastward. This is a bridge that goes over Trunk Highway 212 and Shady Oak Road. You can kind of see, just a kind of reminder, whenever we show these photos, we typically have a map up at the upper right corner to show you approximately where these are located. And the contractor just a few weeks ago installed a number of beams to go over the Flying Cloud portion, and there'll be work later on going over 212, working out details with MnDOT on that. Next slide, please. This is our 62 tunnel, LRT tunnel. This is on the south side. We completed the tunnel on the north side. You can kind of see in the foreground there. The contractor is building some retaining walls that will lead up into the tunnel. Where traffic is going over right now, we essentially have the tunnel built underneath that roadway. That's a temporary configuration for 62 right now. It'll eventually be shifted back closer to us as we look at this slide once the south segment is finished. Next slide, please. There's some retaining walls in the Opus area in Minnetonka. A lot of work still to do. We have a lot of retaining walls on this project, 100 plus, so quite busy. Next slide, please. This is a series of retaining walls and eventually be roadway bridges that LRT will essentially kind of scoot through there where the equipment is, if you can imagine, and head off into the trees for another lengthy bridge, a 3,000-foot long bridge that leads us up to Shady Oak Station. And this work, we're looking to have that roadway bridge up and running here later this year for traffic. Next slide, please. Your next one, this is back when it was a little chilly, LRT bridge over Excelsior Boulevard. This is one of our major bridges. We have a 400-foot span that has to go over kind of a diagonal crossing of the Excelsior Boulevard and the freight rail tracks. Next slide, please. This is an image taken kind of winter day there with the pedestrian bridge getting installed. That bridge is nearly complete. I would say just because of our challenges with the schedule, it not only impacts those areas in Minneapolis, but they are impacting other parts of the project because there are some contractual ties to other areas of the project. And so we had anticipated this trail would be open later this year, and we're now looking at 22. And we've been communicating that out to the local communities of that delay. Next slide, please. So this is the excavation for the Kenilworth Tunnel. off to the right there, you can kind of see there's a kind of a pond of water there. The bottom of the excavation is about 15 feet below that water level. That'll be the base of what's called a concrete tremie that we're looking to hopefully do the first one on Friday of this week, and that'll be a good progression for us. And you kind of see in the background there the sheet piles that are in place there. And then these members that are going across, those are the struts that I was referring to in those earlier cross sections. And just kind of get to familiarity, the Cedar Isles condominium is off to the left in both of these photos. That's essentially where the secant pile wall will be going, next to that building, and also their parking structure they have further to the south. Next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. This is the LRT bridge that will go up through Glenwood Avenue. You can see the abutment off in the distance there for the Glenwood Avenue bridge. We'll essentially have 3 bridges here. There will be 2 roadway bridges on either side of the LRT bridge as it goes through the middle. So LRT will be crossing at that roadway grade. And so work has been progressing on that over the winter time. And I think that might be it for my photo slides for the LRT. And I've got a couple of other images. If you could advance the slide there, Greg. So we're also doing some work over at Franklin, the O&M facility. We need to expand this facility to accommodate the 27 vehicles that we have ordered for this segment of the project. And this is essentially advancing the mechanical bays to the north. And there's a new rail control center that'll be up on top. You can kind of see where that framework is starting to take shape. Next slide, please. And I guess that's it for images. Let's go ahead and get into 2021 construction look ahead. So I have a series of maps that talk to each of the communities, and I wasn't necessarily going to go through in detail because there's a lot of information here, but I want to relate to you all that we have these maps on our website. And it's intended to really give folks a heads up on what we anticipate, primarily impactful items, and maybe talk about this slide in particular. And other slides have similar symbols. But in terms of the pile driving, the vibration, those are usually the type of events that folks are really concerned about. Those are depicted with the blue diamond. We also show some roadway closures in red, and where we have maybe some individual lane closures, those are more of an orangish yellow. And this is really just kind of intended to show kind of broadly what kind of impacts are going to be taking place on each of the communities. So Greg, we might just kind of zoom through these because I wasn't intending to a lot of information just to look at, but I'd welcome folks to take a look at our website and take a look at these. And if you have any questions, we could certainly follow up. And then maybe I'll pause there for a moment if there are any questions before I go into light rail vehicles. All right, well, let's go ahead and give you an update on light rail vehicles. So far, we have 13 vehicles that have been delivered. Now, you're kind of maybe wondering why I think I talk about this every time we present this, but do get the question, why are we getting them now? Well, we had a really good order back in 2016, a procurement going, and we had decided along with the county to move forward and with that procurement to get these vehicles, knowing that we were going to be late with the LRT, but it's just really kind of a price we couldn't pass up. So we have 13 vehicles in place on site. We'll have actually 2 are in shipment currently, and we'll eventually have 27 by the end of the year.
They're electric vehicles, is that correct?
They are fully electric, Mr. Chair. So it contributes to Metro Transit's initiative to provide electric service. Yes, sir. All right, next slide, please. A little update on real estate. Several years ago, we committed to giving you a quarterly update on real estate acquisition. Total parcels that we have on the project, 192. That is up from 191. We did add 1 other parcel last quarter, which we, if you recall, we did have action to approve that moving forward. Public parcels, that stayed the same, 42. So that private parcels went from 149 to 150. And back when we were reporting in December, we had 71 parcels complete. We're now at 79. So that process continues along as we move forward on the project. So I think that might be it for my slides. Maybe never mind. We have a relocation. Don't want to forget this one. So we have 177 displacees. Maybe a little bit of an update, 173 displacees that are closed out. 3 have appealed, and so those are kind of ongoing pending review. And there's 4 displacee claims that are being finalized. So with that, Mr. Chair, maybe before I hand it off to John, I could take any questions.
Any questions for Jim? And speak up. Don't have to raise your hand because we can't see you.
I think Councilmember Alice Ringerbressen may have her hand up.
I think that hand has been up for a while.
Oh, it has. Okay.
It just didn't take it down from the last time. I apologize, but I will say, great job. Thank you for the update.
You
All right,
just leave
thank
your
you.
hand up there.
Okay, John, you can take the next slide. Great.
Thank you, Jim. So yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So slide 38 here shows the achievement of the construction contracts on the Southwest Light Rail project to date as of January 31st. And it's a great thing to see that, you know, all of our contracts are currently exceeding their goals. I know that Jim talked a little bit about the uncertainty of the construction delays, and many of the DBE firms that we've been working with, you know, they have some, you know, fears and concerns about the uncertainty there. And the Office of Equal Opportunity is working with the prime contractors to communicate with the DBEs, and we are encouraging them to reach out to us with any concerns regarding how this and their business may be impacted by the delays. Our goal is to be proactive in addressing and mitigating issues where we can do that. Not everything is kind of clear right now. We are still gathering information with the prime contractors, so we want to be proactive and work with folks as you know they see these different concerns rising. So next slide, please. So this is the trend that we have for the civil contract over time, and we hope to maintain this even through the change orders that are coming up. The prime contractor has been adding new DBEs and trying to maintain the same level, if not more, participation from the DBEs and trying to include them in the new work that's coming down the pipeline. So that's something that you know, we look forward to and appreciate them doing that. So next slide, please. And then this is the systems contract. As you can see, over the past few months, the participation has jumped up greatly, and that's due in part to one of the DBE firms that is providing the cables for the light rail train and the delivery of these materials to the contract. Next slide. And here's the Franklin contract. Participation jumped up recently, and that was with them completing some of the work for the outside parts of the building expansion. And then they were continuing work indoors throughout the winter. This contract is scheduled to end sometime by the end of this year. October was, I believe, the month that we were aiming for. And this contract is about halfway through. Based on our conversations with the prime contractor, we expect this level of participation to maintain throughout the rest of the contract. Next slide. And then we have disaggregated all of the construction contracts, the civils, the systems, and the Franklin, and the closed OMF demolition contract. And this is the disaggregated data for all of these construction contracts as a whole. And then if you look in your handouts, you will also see each individual contract being disaggregated out within the different disadvantaged social groups. The next slide is a pie chart that takes all of these DBE contracts on all of these construction contracts and puts them together proportionally to see where, how much each disadvantaged group has been awarded for their contracts and participation on this. And I also want to point out that the selection of DBEs and participation is usually done by the prime contractors when they put their bid packages together, and they get they select which firms they choose to work with, and whoever presents the best value for them for their particular bid. So, next slide. Okay, so we're jumping into workforce here. If there are any questions about the DBE portion of this, I can try to respond to questions there. Hearing none, I'm going to dive into. Yes.
Go ahead.
Quick question. I see, 50% of the, contracts goes to the white women. We always encourage the community, including women, to get contracts, but what else can we do to also alleviate other groups as well?
Can we go back one slide?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I think when we want to diversify the pool of ethnicities or disadvantaged groups for the different type of work, I think that it's good to increase the certification of businesses that are currently out there, because part of what goes into setting goals is the availability. So, there's many different areas in construction that, we can get more folks or look for more folks to be certified in. And that availability also helps with the amount or the different scopes of work when they are selecting groups, when they are presenting their proposals to the prime contractors. And having more firms out there that are able to do the work helps us when we are setting goals, because that also plays a factor when we are setting goals, when there are more DBEs in a particular area of work.
Mm-hmm. So the issue is the availability. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's partially due to the availability. So maybe, for instance, if it's concrete work, if we don't have a lot of DBEs in that area, then when we're setting goals, that kind of impacts it. And then, when they are receiving bids from DBEs, there may be not that many DBEs from a specific disadvantaged group in that to bid for that. And then I think in addition to that, I would say that for the women contracts, there is a lot of women disadvantaged DBEs in a lot of the different parts of the construction scopes too. And I see some of the DBEs for the other ethnicities sometimes limited. Like, for instance, I see a lot of Asian or subcontinent Asian firms in the engineering. So there is different areas where there's more diversity.
Can you go back one more slide back? One more slide. I want to make sure that I see. Yeah. So here's where here I see it's 10% of the almost 50% of it goes to white women. That's really where my question is about. And
yeah, I would also say that it also depends on the scope of work too. So for some of them, if the particular contract that they are bidding for is one that is such as providing the rail for the train tracks, or for our systems contract where Gunner Electric is a DBE firm where they are providing the transit power substations. And that is a big amount within the contract in itself. And this firm is providing that, then their percentage of participation does definitely shoot up based on the scope and what they're able to do.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Councilmember Chambliss. I'm just curious if these workforce participation rates by the disadvantaged groups are similar in other regions outside of Minnesota? And are we seeing trends that are different for Minnesota than other places?
If you're talking about work, it's and comparing regions, that would depend on the population that's there, and then the amount of folks who are within the unions, and those the pool of folks that can be referred by the union or are usually referred by the union to the different construction contractors. In regard to like the DBE firms, I believe that in certain parts of the country there are more developed and diversified DBE directories where there are more firms that are more diverse. So I would say that one of the things that OEO is doing is we've opened up a new unit aimed at engaging the businesses out there to further develop DBE opportunities, and also engage to get more DBEs certified so that we can have a more diverse pool of DBEs to work with.
Okay, that's awesome. And I think it's also, this is Councilmember Chambliss again. I think it's also, is there somebody else talking? Oh, I think it's also important to track these changes over time. That will allow us to see if the demographics are shifting, as well as the workforce participation against those demographics over time, and it will allow us to see how well we're doing. So I'm glad that the OEO is putting a little bit more emphasis on these different data points. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like in the future.
Thank you. All right. Are there any more questions before I jump into the workforce?
Are there any other barriers that you see right now that's stopping you from increasing this number that the council can support you with? Do you think, because sometimes we're not aware of what we can help you to increase this number?
I believe that there was a recent proposal put forth by Ashanti Payne, our assistant director, recently, that was allocating some funds towards increasing participation. So that was something that was, I believe, was voted on or presented recently within the last couple of weeks here.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Fredson, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So just looking at the various slides, it looked like we were under goal up until recently on a number of the metrics, but are you optimistic? And now we're over goal. Are you optimistic that we're going to finish above goal when the project is completed?
Yeah. Well, when the contractors put together their packages and we review them, the majority of the bidders, their commitments is what we hold them to. And if, their commitments are, followed through as planned, then a lot of them will meet goal or exceed goal. There are, however, some unforeseen things, that change orders that may happen. And when those type of things happen, we work pretty closely with the prime contractors to include DBEs in there, so that the participation does not fall below the goal. Because when that happens, then we definitely will look to them for their good faith efforts to see like what additional work have you done, what additional work can you let go of and not self-performed and have a DBE do so that participation can go up. So.
Thank you.
All right. So slide 44 here, if there are no questions. The workforce is being monitored by our partners at the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. So they do a lot of the on-site monitoring and then the crunching of the numbers for the workforce participation. So I want to acknowledge them and their support of our project. This shows the current participation for the month of January, along with the cumulative participation for workforce on the civil contract. In the next few slides, you're going to see that there is a slowdown around this time of year for construction, and Jim also talked about that earlier with the winter slowdown. A lot of the work on this project is slowed down by the outdoors construction. So. Next slide, please. This is a pie breakout of the January work to see where the work in January was a lot of it was done by white men, but the participation on women and people of color is also noted on here too. Next slide, please. And then over time, you can kind of see the participation of women and what I shared before about the participation going down over the winter months due to the industry's construction slowdown around this time period. So next slide. And here is the POC participation, which is also noting some of that. I do want to, however, uplift that our prime contractor, in addition to just being responsive to their own workforce participation, are also holding their subcontractors accountable. And by that, they are adding a new form, asking their subcontractors to fill that out and submit any new hires, any good faith efforts that they've done to recruit and express any hiring needs so that we can know where the deficiencies lie so that we can support them too. So. I saw a hand up.
Yes, yes.
I don't know if it was me, but I actually did have my hand up in the chat intentionally. So I just, this came up last time we talked about the disaggregated data in this, and both I think it's maybe slide 45 perhaps. But I'm wondering, are we still not able to get that the disaggregated data for, instead of grouping the people of color, indigenous, I'm guessing is what POCI stands for, disaggregated. Yep. That's still not available to us.
So, regarding that request, we were able to disaggregate that, and we have a couple slides coming up here that will show that disaggregated data. And then within the handouts, we also have a breakdown of the disaggregated data over time too, because I believe that was requested last time.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. So this is a pie chart showing the overall project to date participation and how it's been, participation has been throughout time for this particular contract. So next slide. And this is the disaggregated table, which I believe that should help answer some of your questions, Councilmember Linnea. And then over time, if you look in your handouts, you should see a chart showing the various ethnicities and genders over time too. So next slide, please. And then We did not show anything for the systems contract because of the participation that has, not really been started. They have about 200 something hours, so it's not really enough data for us to be able to, pull or have enough meaningful charts from. So we are holding off until they have more workforce participation there. This is the Franklin participation. Next slide, please. And then this is also showing the participation over time. The months of October and November are what we want to see is, when the participation meets the 32% goal or exceeds it. We will definitely need more months like this. So we are pushing for them to continue their good faith efforts to have more months like this as we continue on in the project. Next slide, please. And then the women participation, has gone up and then is dipped slightly for the winter conditions. And then next slide, I believe, is the disaggregated data for the Franklin O&M building construction project. And in your handouts, you should also see a breakdown of that and the different ethnic groups over time too, as well. So I believe this is my last slide. So, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Go ahead, Lynette. Do you have another question?
One quick question and then just a statement. Can you define Asian Pacific versus Asian subcontinent?
Yep. So Asian Pacific is in reference to the people from the countries in the Asian Pacific. So that's Malaysia, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea. So that's one segment of it. And then we also have, subcontinent Asian, which is like India, Pakistan, some of those other southern Asian. Yes.
Thanks.
And that sorry. I also want to clarify that those categories pertain specifically only to the DBE disaggregated data, because within the workforce, they disaggregate the data a little bit differently. They just group it all together as Asian.
Thank you for that. I just want to again call out for us that when we look at proportional representativeness, we are doing horribly by the population that is most impacted by our greatest disparity, or one of the populations. And so it'd be nice to have a plan about addressing that issue, where we see huge disproportional lack of engagement in the workforce, especially when African Americans are still our largest non-white population in the state, and they're 2%. We just got to have here's what we're going to do, not just continue to look at these.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would add there that the Department of Human Rights have some of the levers that they are able to help there when they see or have can identify a specific underutilization of a ethnicity. There are levers that they can pull where they are able to set specific goals for different ethnicities, where they see the disparity there. So, but then there is a process to doing that where you would have to meet the requirements or justify it to be able to go down that road. So.
Okay, thanks, John. Should we move to Sam? I know you had some outreach updates.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and council members. My name is Sam O'Connell. Happy St. Patrick's Day from the O'Connell family, I guess. So just a couple of slides on outreach. So very much like Jim shared with you, some summary slides of 2020. We will also do that and then just give you a high level overview of what to anticipate in 2021 and a couple of tools available for you. So Greg, if we could advance to the next slide. Thank you. Just a review of what our tools are for really communicating construction to our communities. Our construction update still tends to be number one in terms of our toolbox. We continue to have nearly 17,000 subscribers with a pretty high open rate, something that we're very proud of. We feel that that keeps it interesting and that the information is useful to our community members. One change that we did make in 2021 is that construction update is now going out every 2 weeks, just because that also just reflects where we are in terms of construction and being as disruptive to community members or changes as well. Really, it's less disruptive and less changes that we're seeing to community members and how they're taking in the project. So every 2 weeks is a good happy medium for us to share that information. There are times when we do have to share some more immediate information, and so we still continue to use our construction bulletins that go out to highlight if there's more immediate activities that are occurring within 24 hours. Speaking of 24 hours, we still answer our phone calls, and in 2020, we received 270 calls through our 24-hour construction hotline. We joked as staff that initially we thought we would get 270 calls a week. And so the fact that we have 270 calls for all of 2020 shows folks are also reaching out to us in other ways. But again, very much a bell curve in terms of as construction activities peak, that's when we receive the most calls. That does not include the hundreds of calls that our outreach coordinators do receive to talk about the project, to share information, to engage community members on what they should be expecting. And so they can range from how's the project going, what should I be anticipating, is this project still happening? If you can imagine, we even get those questions. So our team does an incredible amount of work on that. So just a couple of the pictures, just a description there. On the upper picture, that's David Davies. He's our outreach coordinator for Minneapolis and does an amazing job. That's David working with our construction information work group. And then the picture below is a update that James Makoviak, who works in the Eden Prairie, Minnetonka area, is also giving an update to community members. So we are continuing to be in a virtual environment with a lot of our updates with our community members. Greg, if we could go to the next slide, please. So speaking of our construction information work groups, again, these are geographic specific updates that we provide to community members, both community and business members. And in 2020, you can see the number of meetings that each of the communities meet. They have moved, some have moved to now meeting quarterly, where some folks are continuing to meet monthly. So that's another tool for us in sharing information and probably more importantly, receiving feedback on how we're doing and their concerns as well. In 2021, we do have a few things that we are doing and actually have done. So it started in January, actually, we held our first virtual community town hall. Then at the end of February and early March, we continued with the rest of our communities. And again, very much of what Jim shared with you in highlighting those construction activities, both with maps and pictures, and then also providing an opportunity for community members to share any thoughts that they might have or ask any questions. So we found those to be very beneficial, and we had really good turnout, even in a virtual setting for those meetings. We plan on using social media to continue to highlight construction progress. We find that is a great way for folks to understand some of the construction activities that are happening in the corridor, so we continue to do that. So please follow us on Twitter. That's mostly what we're using. And then again, if you haven't signed up, please sign up for the construction update as well. And just want to share that it is our intent to return to in-person events as soon as it's safe to. We'd love to be giving tours about some of the project activities. We'd love to have meet with residents and have coffee in the corridor and do that. So as soon as we can do that safely, those are some of the activities we're planning as well. If we can go to the next slide, Greg would also like to share with you that there are tools in your toolbox as council members to share with community members. We've just completed a series of community construction videos. So if you go to our website at swlrt.org and you go to project videos, you'll see 2021 community construction videos. And they're about 2.5 minutes each, talking about and highlighting all of our construction activities. So we understand folks can't get to the corridor, so this is the opportunity of the corridor getting to them. So available for viewing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on our activities. So with that, Chair, that concludes our presentation from Jim, myself, and John. We're happy to stand for any questions.
This is Councilmember Musa. Thank you so much for your presentation. The question is, how many of your outreach team are native, Black, speaking in Latino, or speak other language other than English?
Yes, so our outreach team consists of 3 members right now. And so you've seen a picture of David as our Minneapolis outreach coordinator. We have Nkongo Sogolo, who is our outreach coordinator for St. Louis Park and Hopkins, excuse me, had to remember there. So Nkongo speaks about 4 different languages. And then James is our outreach coordinator for Minnetonka and Eden Prairie. English is his main language. We have the ability to tap into other resources with our outreach team, our expanded Metro Transit outreach team, to engage members, other community members with different language needs, as well as we also have on contract translation services and the ability to connect with community members that way as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I know we're going a little over time, but it's a pretty complicated and big project, and you've all been doing a lot, even since we last heard a report. Well, I know we're going to see you again, Jim and Sam and John. I really appreciate the time you spent with us. And I know now that the weather's getting a little warmer, maybe we'll have some, we'll reintroduce some ideas, some tours coming up. And those that really want to see some excitement, come at my house on Friday and watch the concrete trucks go by. That'll be a thriller. So, any other thought, questions? We covered a lot of information today, so thanks everyone for your attention to these matters. And I think we can adjourn the committee of the whole, but stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.